focus in on what some of the hiring trends we have seen, what is the outlook when it comes to employment across the board. And we've got Ramani Dathi, who's the Chief Financial Officer at TeamLease Services. Thank you so much, Ramani, for joining in. To begin with, the report states that despite the kind of global turmoil we've seen, the hiring intent in India has steadily increased over the last year, but it's been a little bit lower compared to Q4 of FY22. What is the outlook in terms of playing a catch-up to what we witnessed in FY22, and what are the factors that you think are really fueling this growth in hiring?
So that's true. We have seen a substantial improvement in the hiring trends, especially compared to last quarters and also compared to last year overall. However, as you rightly mentioned, on a last year Q4 basis, it's kind of flattish in comparison in terms of growth. However, there are few sectors where we haven't started seeing the hiring trends being picked up, like the IT, fintech, edtech, some of these new age companies. So there we haven't started seeing the hirings opening up as of now. Even the outlook for next quarter at this point in time for IT hiring still seems low. Having said that, the rest of the industries being retail, banking, insurance, industrial, engineering, all the other sectors, the hiring numbers have picked up.
Fair enough. Now, what's your outlook, at least when it comes to the kind of layoffs that we've seen? Do you think that the slowdown in hiring to a certain extent now is being protracted, or it's just a 1 to 2 quarter phenomenon when it comes to the startups in particular, given the kind of mass layoffs that we witnessed?
No, we have been seeing the layoffs for the last couple of quarters in startups and few IT companies as well, the smaller ones as well. And those numbers may continue for 1 or 2 quarters, those kind of headcount reductions, because all these companies have come under pressure for margins and reduction of their costs. So they are kind of focusing on increasing their employee productivity by reducing the headcount and completely keeping a hold on new hirings. So we believe at least for next 1 to 2 quarters, this kind of trend will continue. But this is only in the startups space. We are not seeing this kind of layoffs in any other sector.
Okay. But, wanted to also understand, from great resignation, which was the trend last year, to great layoffs, the cycle has been very, very quick-paced, right, Ramani? Do you think companies have been sort of caught off guard with the sudden economic downturn that we're seeing and therefore, downsizing already? Or you think there is an underlying change that is needed by the companies henceforth when they actually, take a look at their overall headcount?
Absolutely. I mean, during the COVID time, the kind of great resignations and in fact, the kind of hikes that companies have offered to the employees to attract talent and to retain talent, it's like 20%, 30%, 40% hikes. So which is the highest ever that we have seen in 20 years of TeamLease. And within like 1 or 2 quarters, everything has changed. And now companies have come under pressure to bring down their headcounts, to bring down their costs. In fact, the offer letters that they have issued, some of the companies are not honoring them. So I think this is also a lesson to the companies in terms of how to keep variability in their cost structures, how not to increase their fixed costs all of a sudden. In fact, the temp staffing, the contract staffing model is one proposal that we are taking to the companies to variabilize their cost structures, because at least in case of contract staffing, the expectation of the employees is not like a full-term employee. So if there is a demand for a temporary period, they can increase their headcount and they can reduce the headcount when the market, the trend is little lower side.
The other trend, Ramani, has also been, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that lateral hires and jumping off ships has also slowed. Do you think all this materially is going to lower the wage inflation corporates faced massively in FY23? And what's your expectation of overall, wage inflation for FY24 as opposed to what we saw in the previous fiscal?
So as I mentioned, during the 2 years of COVID, we have seen 20-30% of wage inflation in IT, which we are expecting low single digit this year, the coming FY24 year. Whereas in non-IT also, it will be slightly higher, maybe 5 to 8% is what we are expecting, but not like the 12-15% that we have seen over the last 2 years. And as you rightly mentioned, even the lateral hiring numbers have come down, and the wage hikes have come down. The variable pays are also, we have started seeing some sort of cuts in the bonus and variable payments to the employees.
Okay, fair enough. I also wanted to get in your outlook then on the kind of CEO exits that we've been seeing. That has been on the rise, especially of late. What is your outlook in terms of this kind of trend? And potentially, I want to understand from you as well what it means for the future growth path for a company as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think this has anything to do specifically with the hiring trends, the CEO changes or the resignations. But in general, the same reasons that we discussed over the last 2-3 years, the companies have increased their spending, focused more on growth or revenue rather than not having a focus on the bottom line, cash flows, and margin expansions. So now companies are also revisiting their strategies to focus more on the actual cash flows, the physical cash flows, and the margin expansions. And some of these changes, we believe, that are also driven by that shift in the strategy.
Okay. And how concerning is the kind of double-digit attrition that we've seen, particularly in the IT space, educational services, and e-commerce? Any signs of a reversal?
We always have high attrition in all these spaces. This is little slightly higher over the last 2-3 years. It's not specific to this quarter or this year. So over the last 2-3 years, the attrition levels are very high. And the industry is also used to that, used to managing these kind of numbers. And they may come down, the attrition numbers will come down because the overall hiring is also getting slowed down. Earlier, the attrition used to get absorbed by the startups, since the startups also have completely stopped hiring. So the overall attrition numbers can come down by at least 5-6 points.
All right. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much for putting all of those details into perspective when it comes to hiring trends, what the outlook is. So yes, the trend is likely to continue when it comes to layoffs, and high attrition has been a phenomenon, but we are likely to see the overall wage inflation, which increased during the pandemic as well, continue. That's the word from TeamLease.